right, hello and welcome to Talkin' Tales. This is your host, Paul Barnett, and I am here with Denise Cummings of Denise's Delightful Dookers Ferret Sanctuary in Auburn, Washington. And we're just going to have a casual conversation today about ferrets, her experience running the sanctuary, and some stories about some of our current and past ferrets. So, Denise, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So, the first question that comes to my mind is why ferrets? How did you come to fall in love with ferrets and decide to adopt them, and ultimately what led to a sanctuary?
Back in 1987 or so, my friends had ferrets. I'd never seen them before. I'd never been around them. Boy, were they having fun in their house. I've never seen animals jump so high or get into the couch and play. And then we move upward to 2002, and my son is living across from people's apartment, and they put a ferret out in the cage in 34-degree weather. Not good. And he said, "Mom, come get it. Come get it." He wouldn't tell me what it was. So I went over there, and I'm not going to leave an animal in that weather. It was cold. Uh, and went over and saw what it was. I just fell in love. She was a dark-eyed white, big enough to be a boy.
Oh, wow.
She was a good-sized ferret, and brought her home. And what I didn't know was that she had a form of abuse. She'd been gone through it, little 3-year-old banging on the cage, and they just didn't play with her as much. And so she would bite me, and every time she bit me, it was to the bone.
Oh.
You could hear it crunch. But I had a gentleman who helped start Washington Ferret come over and introduce me to things about ferrets. And he said, I want you to understand, don't get involved with these guys unless you are going to keep going. Because once you start and once you begin the shelter, he says, it's very hard to stop. So I had no plans of starting at that point a shelter. I just thought she was beautiful and I loved her. And 7 weeks later, she played with me. No biting. She just played with me.
Mm-hmm.
It was so neat. I just loved it. But he was right. Don't start it unless you're going to stop it. Don't start it. If you think you can stop it, it's not going to work.
Yep.
Because they grow on you. I fell in love.
They steal your heart.
She did.
Yeah.
She really did. I called her my loving challenge because I was still new to this. So to have one that had been through some form of abuse, and yet I'm one that wants to hands-on, love on them, play with them. You got to learn how to do it, how to take your time, how to give them time to get used to you, so you don't have so much. They aren't scared.
Right.
They don't have so much fear.
Yep.
And I fell in love, and that was it. And then I started working at a pet shop. Oh. And people started bringing in ferrets that had been terribly abused. I had one she was loaded with fleas, and she had her tail. They'd taken a lighter and burned her tail. And the gal that owned the place, she says, "I can't sell her, so I need you to take her home and make her feel better." Mm-hmm. What did I know? I'm still learning. But I took her home, and that was the beginning of slightly learning the medical. Mm-hmm. And I fell in love with her. I just fell in love with her. And she had a lady that would come in, and she was a breeder. and she lived about 6 blocks from my place, and she came in with a big boy, um, and a medium-sized girl, and she let him out of the cage, and the girl looked at me like I was, forget you, I'm not interested in you. The boy, he came running toward me, and I wasn't sure if I was going to get eaten or if I was going to, he was going to let me love him.
Right.
And he literally jumped in my arms.
Oh, wow.
I was on the floor, and he jumped in my arms, and I grabbed him and loved him, and he kissed me, and he just sat there and looked around. And Carol goes, well, I guess we know who he likes. And that started it. It just, like a snowball, it just got bigger and bigger and bigger, and I fell in love. I did. And because of working at a store, I got introduced more and more to different ones and learning who they were and what they've been through. And sometimes they would come to my place and get better, I guess you could call it. And then I would try to take them back. And people, it's interesting. I learned real quick, people don't want used goods. That's how they see ferrets who have gone through abuse. And I didn't like them. With humans, I didn't like it because that was wrong. Yep. These guys are so sweet, and the ones that have gone through abuse and come out of it are so precious and so neat.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. I hate to hear about ferrets or any animals being abused, but they are just as wonderful as any other ferret. Yep. And they so appreciate affection. They can be so affectionate. I should say, here while I'm visiting Denise, I brought Skeeter with me, who, for those of you who might follow Saving Skeeter on Facebook, he is a handsome little ferret who was severely abused. And he, like the ferret you mentioned a minute ago, something happened to his tail, where it was either stepped on or caught in something, or we're not sure what, but he had the last maybe inch or so of his tail amputated because it died. But that was sort of the least of his physical abuse. He had cigarette burns on his back. He had a broken leg that wasn't treated. Something happened to his ear. We believe he was thrown against a window. And thankfully, the worst that came out of it was that he lost about an inch of his tail, and he has a scar on his leg. The doctor was able to save his leg, but he is just the sweetest little man. He is so loving. He is so playful. He is, as best as we can tell, let go of all that, negative past. And he's got lots of brothers and sisters now, and he looks forward to playtime every day, and he loves to snuggle, loves to be held. He'll give you kisses, and every day is a new adventure for him. So he's amazing. And it breaks my heart to think that, there are people that wouldn't want someone like him simply because somebody else was cruel to him.
To me, it doesn't make any sense because they're being cruel to them, and you don't want them anymore. Yeah. Or other people they hear about it. When I would adopt out, I would tell them what they've been through. And some people actually backed out of it, away from it, because they didn't trust them. And I thought, why don't you trust them? I do. And I'm the one here all the time playing with them, and I'm here feeding them, and I'm doing things with them. Yep. Why? It doesn't make any sense.
I mean, I in those cases, I just sort of think that it's the human's loss, because the ferret, the human would be lucky for the ferret to accept them and sort of adopt them. Like I technically adopt ferrets, but I feel like I'm adopted by them. Like they're, in some ways they're rescuing me. And it's a privilege to take care of them and to enjoy their antics. They're always, if they're not sleeping, they're on the go. And
Yep.
it's just, they they make me laugh. They make me smile. Of course, when they have to leave, they break my heart. But I sort of feel like I think the thing I've said to some other people, a few times is they're going to live and die whether I'm there or not. And
Mm-hmm.
why not be a part of their lives? Why not give them a good home because I can and because they're so wonderful? Like, let me enjoy them and give them some enjoyment. And yeah, yes, they don't have the longest lifespan. I wish, I wish they could live forever.
Yep.
But I think in my experience, maybe starting around age 5, they seem to start to decline. And the majority of mine I've lost around age 7. I have one now, Milo, one of my Milos. I have 2 Milos right now, Sable Milo and Silver Milo, who I just adopted from you a couple weeks ago. And Sable Milo is going to turn 9 in about a week, if he makes it, and I hope he does. He's doing reasonably well given his age and condition, but usually around age 7, in my experience. What's your experience been in terms of their lifespan?
Most of them, it really is. It's between 5 and 8 that I've lost. I have had one till he was 10 and a half.
Oh,
and
wow.
Dr. Delaney and Dr. Carter, both, they just couldn't believe, because you couldn't look, I guess by checking their teeth and some of the other things, he came in at age 9, and I had him for a year, and he'd been into the vets, and they were just amazed. He didn't have, at this point, wasn't showing signs of adrenal, no lymphoma, no insulinoma.
Wow.
He had cataracts. He had some, I will call it blindness. It's a form of blindness. They can see outlines,
Mhm.
but they really can't see a lot. But he lived until he was 10 and a half.
Wow.
And that was so neat, because he was a hugger. I got to hug a lot. But most of them, most of them have been in that range. I have put down, had to have put down recently, 2 8-year-olds.
Mm.
That were doing great, and the one wasn't aware, and they weren't aware, had lymphoma.
Oh.
And her belly was getting large, and I knew there was a problem, but I knew she quit the soup. And I'm going, no, because she's a little piggy in the soup, so something's going on.
Yeah.
The other one, that was Nellie, was having trouble walking and stuff. She was act like she was really tired, but she would keep walking and then find a good place to lay down in.
Mm-hmm.
And she had a lot of fun. She liked her place. Once in a while, she'd let somebody in with her, but otherwise, no.
Oh.
That was her place to sleep. But she went downhill within 4 days.
Oh.
And it's hard.
Lymphoma,
They're my babies, so
I totally understand. Lymphoma is horrible. I've had 2 with lymphoma. Back in 2017, early 2017, I guess it was late 2016, my ferret, Peter, a handsome little guy, my only boy at the time, he had something was off with his left eye. It looked like maybe it had been injured, but he didn't injure it, certainly not in my presence, and there wasn't anything he could have injured it on. And a little bit of the third eyelid was showing, and the eye was red. And I took him in to the doctor and put him on some medication, some eye drops and antibiotics, and those seemed to help a little bit, but then it stopped helping. And we tried a few more things, and finally took him in for a CT scan because we couldn't quite figure out what was going on. And he ended up passing away. His heart stopped during the scan when he was under, and the doctors tried to revive him, but they couldn't. And they came out and told me that what they found, though, in the scan was that he had multiple tumors. He had lymphoma, and it was fairly advanced. And it would have been a matter of weeks before we would have had to let him go anyway. So, in a way, I guess you could say it was a blessing, but it was still heartbreaking because he had been doing so well. In fact, that day when I brought him in for the scan, he was running around exploring the exam room. He other than just having a little something off with his eye, he wasn't showing any other symptoms. He was eating well and whatnot and playing. But then he was just gone. And then just beginning of this year, I lost Kyra, who I talked about in a previous episode. To not to lymphoma though. She was my little miracle. She was showing signs of lymphoma back in early 2020, and we tried everything. If you want to hear the full details, we can listen to the previous episode. But we tried everything. Nothing worked. She was getting fairly large tumors. We thought we were going to let her go, but we tried this sort of Hail Mary with this immunotherapy vaccine that hadn't been used in ferrets before for lymphoma. And it worked. It worked big time. And all of her tumors disappeared and her eyes returned to normal. And she lived 2 more years, happy and healthy and active and playing until heart disease took her. And I really wish, I am so glad that the immunotherapy worked for Kyra. It hadn't been developed until 2017. I wish we had known about it back then because I would have loved to have treated Peter with it, but it just simply wasn't available back then. And one of the things with that treatment is that it requires a tumor sample to make a vaccine, and not all lymphoma results in tumors, and certainly not ones that are large enough to be used to make the vaccine, and not even some of them cannot be safely extracted. Like you need to be able to. The ferret needs to be healthy enough for you to be able to do a minor procedure to remove a tumor. In Kyra's case, we were lucky that one of the tumors on her leg was she was otherwise, healthy. She didn't care she was sick. She was active. She was playing. And we were able to put her under and take the tumor out of her leg safely without affecting her leg. She lost no mobility. But that treatment is it's not guaranteed to be successful for everyone and not available to everyone. One possibly due to the cost, but also again health conditions. Like if the ferret is not in a condition to have surgery, you can't really do anything. It can be it can take them very quickly, and it can be just horrible to watch them decline.
I had a gentleman bring in, he had 5 ferrets, and his wife passed away, and he wasn't able to emotionally take care of them. So he brought them in, and he put them in a nice size carrier and started to show me, and he goes, "Oh, wait a minute, I have to get this for you," and went out and got something and brought it in, and I was starting to bring them out and looked, and one of them eye was bulging out about an inch and a half. That's quite a ways.
Yeah.
And I just saw the one side, and he started talking to me, and he says, "Yeah, I know, I just wasn't able to take him in." And he left. Just turned the head a little bit. The other one was just starting. And immediately went in the next day to Dr. Carter, and he had a tumor. It was already in his brain. It had already done that. But why not put them down? Why? You're going through a lot. Well, what's he going through? Because there has to be pain in that.
Yeah.
But we had him put down right away because there's no way he was going to. There was not enough medicine to deal with the pain, and with the eyes bulging as far as they were, it's not fair. In dealing with the ones that have come in that are not doing well, and you can tell they probably will have to go over the Rainbow Bridge. I have actually had 3 different groups at different times, two, each were two, believe it or not. Um, One came in that had been around a lot of heroin,
Oh.
one around marijuana. And how I know is because they told me. I don't know
Oy.
why they would admit to me and not to anybody. I don't know. But then we got 2 more in, and you could see from her teeth were really bad. She wasn't forming words correctly. She had trouble talking, let's just put it that way. She brought them in, and the one girl was a dark-eyed white, beautiful. But boy, she had a huge belly. Scared me to death. I knew something was up. Showed me the sable, and he was more, the lights are on, but nobody's home. And I wasn't sure what that meant at that point. Then she started telling me how they were keeping them in a house, and then they decided, oh, we're going to put them in a barn. They were making meth in the barn. These guys were higher than kites, and the reason I thought the little girl should be, well, big girl should be in pain. The reason she wasn't was because she was high.
Oy.
And so was the boy. And I decided we're taking her in tomorrow, and she was gone. Dr. Carter decided to open her up and see maybe if there is something we could take a look at. Mm-hmm. It was the size of a medium-sized potato. It was a tumor. And she said she wouldn't have felt it because she has so much drugs in her. Well, the boy was still at my place, and he was okay. I gave him soup. I make my own soup for the babies, and he was eating it like he hadn't eaten in a long time, which maybe I wouldn't doubt.
Yeah.
But I had water out for him, and he just wasn't there. And so I called a friend who had been on drugs for years, came off of drugs, doing wonderfully. And I said, okay, I've got one that was around meth, hired a kite, and they had to put down his cage mate. He is just not there. I said, what can I do to help? Because I don't have meth. I don't have something to bring him down off of this. Mm-hmm. And he said that you just need to keep him hydrated and lots of protein. Now, doesn't that sound like what ferrets get anyway? So
yes.
I had kibble for him, but he preferred the soup. He would go through 4 bowls.
Wow.
Little bowls in a day. And I decided to go to a bigger bowl so that he could come get it anytime he wanted. He didn't have to depend on me to come, oh, he really looks like he needs it, and come and give it to him. So just give him a good-sized bowl. He lived for about 4 months after that, but they don't doubt that the drugs had a lot to do with it.
Sure.
His kidneys and his liver failed. He had really bad teeth too. Really bad teeth. And I thought that was only in humans, but I guess if you're around it enough, it's destructive. My heroin babies, they just came down off of it. I did soup with them, and they did fine. They lived for about a year and a half. And then the ones that were on marijuana, the one boy, again, was the lights are on, but nobody's home. Mm-hmm. He didn't close his eyes. I swear, he didn't close his eyes for a few days.
Oh, my.
And I thought, shouldn't be happening.
No, no.
Not at all. But they ate and they drank water. They did come out of it, and they were alive for 2-3 years afterward.
Wow.
But that people don't realize how much soup really makes a difference.
Well, and not just any soup. I've got to say, so you seem to have this magical soup that is sought after by veterinarians.
Yeah.
And I say thank you. You shared a portion of it with me a couple weeks ago when I adopted Milo and Charlie and Spunky. And not only do they love it, but I've shared it with some of my other ferrets, and it seems to be magical. Without divulging any secrets,
No.
what do you do? What is your soup? What's in your soup that makes it so amazing?
Dr. Carter said that what she said about my soup was that there's nothing in it that the ferrets can't have.
Okay.
And I thought, okay, what does that mean? But I gave her my recipe, and it's just kibble. I boil water. I pour it over the kibble. I have chicken already deboned and put it in there. I use ferret vite,
Oh, okay.
olive oil, and salmon oil.
Ah.
Now you don't use a lot of it. You
Sure.
use it, right?
Yep.
And you take the hot water and boil, and then you pour it over it, and you let it get soft, and then I run it through a food processor, and then I freeze it. And I don't understand it either, because Dr. Carter has said, whatever you're doing, keep it up, because I've got ferrets that should have been gone. I worked with Washington Ferret when they had some babies that were in really bad shape, and she says they're not going to make it for for 2 weeks or so. Okay, kept giving the soup. I only lost one within about 3 weeks after, but he had a heart condition, and the heart quit. The other ones that she had told me were going to pass in a couple of weeks lived for 2.5 years.
Wow.
And she kept saying, oh, they're dead, right, Denise? They're gone, right? And I go, no, they're in there talking to Dr. Carter. And she just couldn't believe it, and shook her head and was laughing. It's just, no, they're supposed to be gone because they weren't doing that well here. I have no idea. I know a lot of it too was the volunteers I had at the time. Phenomenal. I mean, you knew they loved them. They knew they were loved.
Mm-hmm.
But the soup has there's something to do with protein and
the right combination of ingredients and the right proportions.
I guess it just works. And believe it or not, I got it from Terry Cunningham.
Okay.
She was one of my mentors, and she started me on that. Well, then I took it and did it up a little bit so that it fit what they liked.
Right.
And I don't put anything in it other than that.
I should also mention Terry is the woman who introduced me to Skeeter.
Yes.
She nursed him back to health and made sure he was under constant supervision while he was recovering, and got all the medications he needed, and got some supervised playtime and it's safe playtime, because for many weeks he had a cast on his leg that he kept working out off of his leg because he didn't want to have it, and so she kept having to take him in to get it rewrapped, and she took phenomenal care of him, got him back to excellent shape, and I think the day that he came home to me was shortly after he got his cast off, and he needed a little bit of water therapy just to exercise his leg to help build muscle there, but she did an amazing job just getting him the care that he needed.
She's an amazing lady. I cannot appreciate her more. she, you can tell that lady just loved them to pieces. I started loving and understanding more the ones that had health issues, or that were having problems, medical issues, if you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
And because of her, my interest spiked. And it
I want to say, since we've been talking about medical issues, of course, I think we all hate to see any ferret or any animal in any kind of distress, any kind of ill health. I will say, one of the bright lights and all of that for me has been when you have to give them their medications, when you have to give them extra soup. For me, it's extra bonding time. I mean, you get to spend time with your ferrets anyway. When they're out playing, even when they're sleeping, they wake up and they want a little attention. And you don't want to see them sick, but when they are sick, you sort of get that a little extra one-on-one time with them. And I've had some where they just love to lay in my arms, or just want to be held for a minute, and they kind of look at you with these eyes that are sort of like, I trust you, and thank you. And
they also show you, if you're watching, there's more going on than you think there is. Because when I'm doing the soup, and when I'm, like you said, it's one-on-one, and I love doing it because I see more. I'm more aware of what's going on medically,
mm-hmm.
what their health is, if it's going downhill or if they're starting to do a little better.
Right.
By taking that time.
Yeah, you can see those smaller changes that the casual observer might miss.
Yes.
It can be anything from just the way they stand or the way they move, to the look in their eyes, or how they chew their food, or any small things, again, that the casual observer might miss. But you see them, and it can be a sign of pain, or maybe they need adjustments from their medications, or maybe they're saying, sometimes they're saying, I'm done. Like,
right.
It's time. Those are some of the hardest ones. I know I've had several cases. I'm sure you've had a lot of these where they reach a point where maybe you need to help them when they eat. I've syringe fed some soup, and when they get to the point where they clench their mouth closed and they refuse even a small amount of soup, and it's sort of, that usually coincides, in my experience, with what I'd say the light disappears from their eyes. It's sort of, they get this dull, withdrawn look in their eyes, and it's sort of to me, it's them saying, I'm done. Please, help me out of this failing body. And I've had a mix of those who have left on their own terms, where I know them. In some cases, I know they're declining, and I check in on them a little more frequently than others. And I had one, a little over a month ago, Willow, who, she had lost some weight. I track their weight every week or every other week, and she was at her lowest weight, and so I was giving her extra soup. And other than that, though, she was acting normally, she was playing normally, and I made an appointment with the doctor because I was concerned that she wasn't putting the weight back on. And I put her back in her cage after soup, and I checked back on her 45 minutes later, and she was gone. And turns out that in her case, it was a previously undetected tumor on her liver that had ruptured, and there was nothing we could have done. But it's heartbreaking. I guess the good news, if any, in that is that she didn't feel any pain. She didn't suffer. But it's just as hard when you see them decline, and there's nothing you can do other than support them until they give you that look, until they say, please, it's time.
That's the hard part. I can deal with the ones that I'm giving medicine to, and I watch them either decline or do a little better, because I can grieve with them, and I don't, it's not something like Remington. I walk in my door, the back door, I look He's having breathing problems. I'm going, oh no, open it up, pick him up. His heart, I could feel his heart. And he didn't want me to hold him. He was very uncomfortable. So I put him back in, and Milo, Silver Milo, that you had,
Mm-hmm.
came down and stayed by him. And I closed and I went in to get the stuff ready that Dr. Johnson Delaney taught me how to do in case they're going through a heart attack. And there are some things you can do. Doesn't always pan out.
Sure.
But you have the availability of helping. I got in the kitchen, just started, and I went, something's not right. And so I walked back in there. He was gone.
Oh.
He was gone.
Yeah.
And I said, this is not fair. This is not fair because he was my boy. And I like to watch what they go through and how I can help them. I couldn't help him.
I think I agree that the cases where you want to help them, they show you that they want to live, but there's nothing you can do, or it's just some of the hardest ones. I think on a previous episode I talked about my ferrets Ace and Dodger, and I'm not going to go through their whole story again right now, but Ace was one of those. In the ferret community, you call them heart ferrets. He was a stray. He was happy on his own, but he was also just as happy when he became part of my family and had all sorts of friends and siblings. And he wanted to live. He didn't care. He ultimately, he had bone cancer. He had to have part of his jaw removed. He didn't care. He figured out how to eat his solid kibble with half a jaw. His best friend Dodger died from liver failure after beating DIM, disseminated idiopathic myositis, which was heartbreaking to me. That was one of those cases where there was nothing I could do. I didn't know. Nothing was showing up on his scans. He was fine. I came home one day and he was gone. And that was just after Ace had a surgery. And it got to the point where Ace was starting to have trouble walking, and it turned out that he had a tumor on his spine that was inoperable. And at this point, Ace was about 8 years old. And the doctor just sort of told me, take him home, love him, keep him comfortable until he, lets you know that he's done. And that ended up being not quite 3 months later, I believe. And even on his last day, he couldn't walk. His back legs didn't work at all. He was dragging himself around with his front legs. He wanted to explore. He wanted to play, but he couldn't. And so the kindest thing that I could do was let him go. But that was the hardest thing to do because he wanted to live.
It's called a gift. And I saw that on Facebook. Somebody says the best gift you can give them is to let them go. And, that is such a precious way of looking at it. It's hard as all get out. And I lose it when I talk about Tucker Joe, so I don't talk about Tucker Joe too often. But that gift, it is a gift. They aren't in pain anymore. They aren't hurting. They aren't suffering. Eventually, even some of this, like you talking about, his liver, and that liver doesn't really have a lot of feeling, but around it does. That's his body, and it's going to hurt. Eventually, something will hurt.
Yeah.
And so it's a gift. One of the things you had talked to me, you asked me about was what are some of the challenges. That's one of them. It's knowing when to allow them that gift, and when should we try other things to help. The other thing there, in talking about the challenges of having a shelter, is not just their medical issues, although that's huge. but it's also having them come in bad shape and learning to be very polite and very nice to the
Human.
humans who
Yeah.
I'm going to send out the door as soon as I can.
Yeah.
Because some of them, it's just like getting rid of a sack of garbage.
Yeah.
I've actually had people in their way of bringing them in and just discarding them. And I get them to sign the paperwork, and I say, "You've done your part now." And I open the door, and I want to shove them out, but I don't. But they walk out. Oh, we're done. Okay. Whew. They're glad to be out of here.
Yeah.
Um, that that to me it was kind of aggravating. I had to work with some of my volunteers because um, the one lady came in, was her boyfriend's ferret, discarded the ferret, walked into my living room with her daughter, who was about 5 years old, and she turned to her mom and I'm standing right there, and one of my volunteers walks in, the wrong one to walk in, and you'll know why in a minute. She looked at her mom and she goes, "Can we go get that kitty now that you said we could have?" And the one volunteer started to say something, and I turned to her and told her, I said, no. I quietly, no. And she walked back into this room that we're talking in and closed the door. And when I came in afterward, I swear there was the air was blue in here. She was so mad, so mad. But that was the one that really got to some of my volunteers. Dump and grab, get something else.
Yeah, those cases. I mean, I hate to hear about those. I think is the humans don't deserve the ferrets or any animals in that
or
case.
Any animal.
Yeah.
I'm in agreement there.
Yeah. If you take the time to get to know a ferret, and to be honest, like I think we know this because we live it, but they are work. You have to keep litter boxes clean. You have to keep cages clean. You do laundry regularly. Clean their bedding. Keep their water dishes and water bottles full.
Do spa day.
Spa day, yes. Trim their nails, clean their ears. You got to keep their teeth brushed. And there's a certain level of expense comes with that, where you got to make sure they get their regular health exams, vaccinations. Some of them occasionally need their teeth cleaned, dentals, in addition to regular brushing. And the one of the worst things that can happen is just those when you get the news from the doctor that, oh, this ferret has insert medical condition here that they showed no signs of, and in the best case they might just need to be on medication for the rest of their lives, which is really not a big deal. It means you're going to be preparing syringes, once or twice a day for, a few years, or as long as they can live. In the worst case, you get the news that it's a terminal condition, cancer, something inoperable. And, but there's the, monetary expense of that. And there's the emotional toll that we've talked about, of taking care of them, watching them decline, knowing there's, in some cases, there's nothing you can do. But so you have to be prepared to own a ferret. It's not just, oh, they're cute and cuddly, I want one, I'm going to keep it in a cage and take it out every now and then. They need daily playtime and exercise. They're very social creatures. I'm trying to think of how somebody I was talking to put it, where they're always trying to kill themselves. Not in a mean way, but they're if you think cats are curious, ferrets are curious about everything. They want to get into everything. They want to climb things. Some people, they want to disassemble things. They want to eat things that they shouldn't be eating. And so you're always kind of saving them from themselves. And, one of the things that I had to do, gosh, I've had ferrets for 20 years now, 21 years. But I learned in the first couple of years, all the things that I had to do to my house to make it safe for them. Like I don't want to have a play area that's just like, oh, here's this little cardboard box or this little tiny fenced in area of a couple feet where they get to play. Like I've literally ferret proofed the entire first floor of my house. So when they come out to play, they can safely go anywhere on that floor, and they're not going to find things to ingest that will kill them. They're not going to get stepped on. They're not going to climb inside of a couch and get injured. They're not going to. There's no recliner for them to get injured in. They need a safe environment, but a large environment for them to play in. I told a story on I think the first episode of this podcast about my first ferret, Buffy, who was an escape artist, and this kind of ties back to how smart they are, but also how you have to ferret proof. She learned how to open her cage from the inside, so she had playtime whenever she wanted playtime, and so I put the cage inside of a fenced-in area. That didn't help much because she still knew how to open the cage from the inside, but then she learned to climb on top of the cage and jump over the fence. And so I thought I was getting smart here, and I built a roof on top of the cage, an angled roof made of cardboard, so that whenever she would try to climb up there, she would just slide off. And I did it as kind of a quick fix to see if it would work as a concept. And I used twist ties I punched holes in the cardboard and tied the cardboard roof to the top of the cage. And this little lady watched what I did. And as soon as I was done tying the roof onto the cage, she went back to the first twist tie. She grabbed it with her teeth and pulled it until it untied. And then she went to the next one and did the same thing. And the next one, the next one, the next one. She untied every single twist tie that I tied. She then walked out of the cage, climbed up the side of the cage, pushed the roof off of the cage, and jumped over the fence. So if you don't think they're smart, she knew exactly what I did, and she knew exactly how to undo it, and she undid it. So they are incredibly smart. But that's when I, kind of realized, okay, I need to give them a little more room. And so I literally changed my house. Like, I don't have carpeting anymore. Some people do, and that's fine, but it's easier to keep the tile floor clean. And it's safer, if I try to keep their nails trimmed, but if they start to get too long, I don't want their nails to get caught in any carpet. I don't have traditional furniture. I don't have a couch and a recliner. I have furniture that's comfortable for me to sit in and relax in, but that's also safe for the ferrets. I don't have high things that they could climb and jump off of. Things that are sensitive, cabling and smaller things that they could potentially bite are up high enough that they can't reach them. And so it's not just I got a ferret and I'll give them some attention every now and then. I'll make sure they have food. It is life-changing, but in a very positive way.
Very, very much so, because my first mentor, she came into the ferretorium and we were getting it ready. And I said, oh, well, we could bring him in here. And she goes, no, we can't. She says, you have to think ferret.
Yes.
What's thinking ferret? Because I'm thinking human. No, you think ferret. So there were many, many things. She would come back a couple times a week. Oh, no, you're not thinking ferret. And you get frustrated because this is what they're going to do.
Yeah.
Whether you realize it or not. But it would frustrate me because I thought I was doing so good. And thanks to her, every time something happens, it's, okay, think ferret. And you do. You start thinking ferret. You really do. And
it can be some very non-obvious things, that, for example, I think we were talking earlier about placement of cages. I have a couple of Ferret Nation cages, and I had them close to the wall, but not right up against the wall. And I have a couple of ferrets who decided they wanted to climb up to the top of the cage on the outside by using the wall for support. And of course, once I get up there, then they're like, okay, how do I get down? And you don't want a ferret jumping from 6 or 7 feet up. So I had to move the cages closer to the wall. But then ferrets have a way of pooping in inconvenient places and getting it to go on places like the wall, which is even easier now since it's against the wall, since the cage is against the wall. And so I learned to put backdrops on the back of the cages to protect the wall, and also to give a little scenery to the cage to make it a little more colorful. Um, so it protects my walls and protects the ferrets from being able to climb up the outside of the cage. So all sorts of things you need to do. Simple things. Even some of my furniture. I have these acrylic tables that have smooth sides, which works great because they're stylish for me and fairly easy to keep clean. But they're also slick and smooth on the side, so ferrets can't climb up to get to things like audio and video equipment that are sitting on them. So if it can be climbed, they will climb it. If it can be chewed, they will chew it. If it can be crawled into, if all they need is an opening of an inch or two, and they will find a way inside. I have a it was my third ferret, Zoxon. I got him when he was just a little baby, and by this time I thought I had ferret-proofed the first floor of my house. And so he was running around and playing, and he ran into the kitchen, which was fine because there was nothing in there for them to get into, or so I thought. He climbed under my stove. Now, it wasn't on at the time. I would not have any of the equipment on like that when ferrets were out playing. But there was a gap of maybe an inch and a half at the bottom of the utility drawer on the bottom of the stove, and he climbed. He squirmed under there, and then he couldn't get back out. And so I had to, I was sort of panicking a little bit, but I was trying to think calmly. And I had to, with one hand, thankfully I was pretty strong. I had to lift my stove with one hand an inch and grab him with the other hand and slide him out.
Try to get him out.
And then, my immediate next thing was, okay, to figure out how do I keep them from crawling under there? Because keeping them out of the kitchen was not really an option. The doorways were wide enough. They didn't have traditional doors. Pet gates really weren't an option because they can just climb those. And if they're, perfectly vertical or even at an angle to prevent them from climbing them, they will work at them until they tip them over enough to be able to climb them. So I ended up with putting what is essentially like a vinyl molding that you might, like a baseboard you might see, against the wall on the bottom front drawer of my stove. It's not anything that they can chew and it's thick enough and strong enough and sturdy enough that they cannot, squeal under there. And so it protects them, and it protects them from going under the stove. And it's color matched to the stove, so it doesn't look unsightly in the room. But I had to like you said, think like a ferret, because that was one thing that I missed, and they found it, and so I had to make adjustments.
These are the things people don't understand or don't realize. I was at a Petco meet and greet many years ago, and we were talking with people and showing them the ferrets, putting them back in the cage, and a mother walks in. She's got a baby in one arm, a 2-year-old in another on her hand, and then one that was about 5 or 6. And she walked in, and the little girl on her hand was holding her hand. Oh, Mommy, I really want one of these.
No.
And she just looked at it, and she looked at me, and I said, oh, did you know these guys, just so you, as a mom, can understand them a little better before your decision making, they're a combination of a puppy, a kitty, and 2 2-year-olds. And she says, that's it. And she walked away.
And they will stay like that. They, it's not like sometimes with a puppy, they have tons of energy and they want to, tear apart everything when they're really small, but then, they grow up, they mellow out, and you train them to some extent. Ferrets can be trained to a certain extent, but until they're, old and or very sick, they're going to be very active. They're going to be exploring and playing. So they're not going to, and this is not a knock against them. This is just sort of, the reality of they are little bundles of energy, and they stay that way for a very long time.
They are. And then you tell moms about this. 2-year-olds, you have a 2-year-old, you know what a 2-year-old can do.
Yep.
And it's like, nope, not going to do it. I really encourage people. I say I encourage, actually I'm discouraging, because by telling them two-year-olds, they are. They have more energy than they probably have more energy than 3 2-year-olds at times until, like you said, they get older. But they are so much fun. But what people don't realize is the responsibility and what can happen, what can be done, how much it's going to cost. Mm-hmm. That's one of the things that I ran into people that would rehome or surrender their ferret to me. I didn't realize how much it was going to cost me.
Yeah, you have to be prepared. Again, it can be, of course, there's regular medical exams like any animal, but you'll also have, for example, I forget the exact number, but some very high percentage of ferrets will develop adrenal disease, and to treat that, you can either get a monthly Lupron shot, or you can get generally roughly an annual desarolin implant.
Right.
Either way, it's going to cost you hundreds of dollars. And if you go with the Lupron shot, that is a monthly thing. That's not a when I think of a thing. That's not a when I can get to a thing. That is an every month. If you can do it on the exact same day every month, great. Or as close to that day as possible, you need to take them in to get a shot. And you have to be prepared for that responsibility.
Oh, yeah. It's not like you said, it's not just them getting in places they can't. It's costing things you can't afford. Some people, that's how some people look at it. I can't afford that. I had a gal who worked at for a vet, and they got a discount, but they couldn't figure out what was wrong with the ferret, and she was running up hundreds of dollars. She brought the ferret into me and says, I can't do this anymore. Mm-hmm. I can't afford this. Took it in to Dr. Carter. She figured it out, and we were fine.
Yeah, that's brings up another point, which is you don't want to take a ferret to just any vet. You want to find an experienced and knowledgeable exotic vet who is experienced with ferrets. Right. In a lot of cases, there's a lot of ferret conditions that an experienced vet like Dr. Carter can look at the ferret and say, this is what's going on, or this is likely what's going on. Let's do a test and confirm it or not. Versus, I don't know, let's try 5 or 6 different tests and see what might come out of that. And they can't figure it out, and then they just kind of throw their hands up in the air. And I'm not knocking other vets. It's just they don't have a lot of vets have experience with dogs and cats. That's what they're trained on, and I'm sure they're great at what they do. But you need to have one that has experience with ferrets. They develop conditions that dogs and cats don't get. They I don't want to say it can be difficult to treat, but are just it's a specialized area of knowledge where they just have these things like insulinoma, like adrenal disease, right. Where the ferret, of course, is not going to tell you this is what's wrong with me. And sometimes, occasionally with like adrenal, you can look at them and say this ferret might be adrenal. It could be by their orange tint of their coloring, the loss of fur on the tail, maybe aggressiveness, some of those symptoms. And so the vet might be able to have a guess just based on appearance, but they will know which tests to run to confirm that diagnosis.
Yes. And the other thing to go along with that is before you go into the vet, when you call them and ask that you are interested in making an appointment, find out how many ferrets they see in a month.
Yes. We haven't seen a ferret here in a couple of years.
Right.
Well,
And that's happened before. They didn't ask. And they said, we heard that and we should have asked and we didn't. They ended up, the ferret died because they didn't know what to do.
And some things, in that same vein, I had a vet once who wasn't a ferret vet, but was a specialist helping my ferret vet with a very specific case, and they prescribed I can't remember the exact medication, but it was antibiotic, and they gave a dosage that would have been okay for a dog, not for a ferret. Thankfully, I said, thank you, but I'm going to run this by my ferret vet, who looked at this and said, no, this will kill the ferret. Let's get you the right dosage. So again, it's not that I distrust the vets, but it's just a ferret vet knows ferrets, and they know, again, not just what to look for, and what to test for, but also what medications make sense in what dosages.
Right.
Because it might be the right medication, but if you give them a dose that's for a dog, that could kill the ferret. So can't stress that enough, to finding a vet you trust who knows ferrets, who has hands-on experience with ferrets. It's incredibly important.
Very, very important. I had some ferrets that I'm glad we had. I had one, Dr. Brazeau up in Covington, and I had Dr. Johnson Delaney, of course, and then Dr. Carter. And I feel so blessed because I've had so many that have gone through so much, and they're willing to teach me. Now, again, I'm a shelter sanctuary, mostly sanctuary now, but in them teaching me, I've been able to help, not just mine, but I've had a couple of the vets calling me and saying, I'm sending you so-and-so, will you do all the check their gums, do all this, and let's have their heart rate and their blood sugar and everything. And so I get to help them. And I'm not a vet. I do all this extra stuff that she does right at the beginning. And I call her back, I give her the report, and then she tells me what to do. Or she tells me to wait until tomorrow, and bring them up.
Right.
And I feel very blessed because I have helped quite a few. I've also had her tell me to give them medicine, and the medicine knocked them out. Well, I didn't know that's what it would do, and I thought I killed the ferret.
Oh.
I was dying inside, so I talked to her, and I said, you know what? All three were ladies, by the way, and I won't say which one. But I said, you know what? I said, you need to tell me what the medicine will do, because I went through grieving because I thought I had killed a ferret, and no, it just knocks them out. Yeah. And right now we need to have that so their heart does better.
Right. Yes, I can imagine that would be.
And it was awful. So after that, we, no problem. Let me know what the medicine was. And I do not give out medicine, by the way, to anybody or to do anything. I will regulate it according to what she tells me to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm thankful that the doctor showed me many things. Some of them, like I said, helps me help her.
Exactly.
For example, this is something that every ferret owner, in my opinion, should do, which is keep a log of your ferret's weight. Check their weight every week or every other week, because their weight can go up and down by season, and that can be normal. But if they're sick, their weight might drop. And if you go to your doctor and you say, I think they've lost weight, and you can't, have they lost 5 grams? Have they lost 100 grams? Do they normally lose that amount of weight at this time of year? Or is that, a sudden change? Again, we're not looking for the person to diagnose their ferret, but if you're able to say, oh, well, in the summer, yes, they usually lose 50 grams, but they've lost 150 this year, maybe there's a problem. And, the doctor has, given me instructions for okay, you know what hairball protocol is. You give them Vaseline, you give them sucralfate or Carafate, you give them Pepsid, but not all at the same time. You can give them gas drops, and the dosages are pretty standard for most of those. I think sucralfate is the one that's based on weight. But I keep those on hand, and I can do those first. If I see a ferret's weight fluctuate a little too much, I can start with that. Especially if there's no other symptoms. Now, of course, if the ferret is incredibly lethargic, or if they have weird looking poops, or if they're just acting strangely, you want to schedule an appointment with your vet as soon as possible. Ask for an emergency appointment if the ferret is that bad off. What if it's just, oh, their weight's dropped a little more than normal? Well, let's start with, especially if it's, a change of season, let's start with the Herdball protocol. Give them a day or two, see if they perk up, if things improve. If not, you can then go to your vet and say, okay, their weight has dropped. I have done this, this, and this, and I'm not seeing an improvement. Can I get an appointment, or do you have more, further advice on what to do? And, go from there.
I've met a couple of people that actually have a folder, and each ferret has, on certain days, if something happens, it's on there. When they see the vet, losing weight. They even learned how to listen to the heart. And they don't, because I even have trouble determining sometimes what's going on. But they'll say, oh, it was going so fast. They write that down. And when they take them in, she knows she's got it right in front of her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that takes up a lot of time when she has to go through all that. And that helps her determine where to start looking.
Right.
What the problem is.
And you build that history. So,
right.
Is this a common thing for the ferret? Is this, very rare?
Right.
Has this happened at the same time each year? Has this happened in response to other external stimuli? When they had a particularly exciting playtime, or maybe somebody new was introduced to the household and they, maybe they got picked on a little bit or whatever. I mean, I'm not saying those are necessarily the causes, but they could contribute, and you at least know, you have the more information you have for your vet, the better the vet can help you.
That's
because
right.
they're maybe not guessing. Not that they're guessing anyway, but they don't have to sort of check for a whole bunch of things. Maybe they can start by narrowing it down and say, well, it might be this or this instead of these 6 different things.
Right.
It might be one of these 2 things.
And don't please. I see so many on Facebook. My ferret's doing this. Should I take him into the vet?
Vet first. Call your vet first.
Don't get a hold of Facebook. Yeah. Get a hold of your vet.
Yep. Yeah.
Don't even think about Facebook, because there are so many wonderful people that can help and that do a wonderful job, and they're shelter moms, so they know a lot. But they're not there. They can't see what's going on with the ferret.
And they don't know your ferret and your ferret's history. Now, there's always exceptions to that. There might be a case where, okay, you've posted about a ferret, they've seen the vet or they're about to see the vet, and you have very specific things and you've already gotten very specific instructions from the vet on what to do. And maybe you just want to ask, a question like, has anyone had an experience with this? What can I expect? My ferret has been diagnosed with this condition. What are some of the things that people have experienced with this? But yes, I totally agree. Don't go on the internet looking for, please be my vet, random person, because random person, 99% of the time is not going to actually be a vet. And their experience with their ferret is going to be different than your experience with your ferret. So yes, I completely agree. Can't stress that enough. Vet first. Call your vet, schedule an appointment. If it is a big concern, like if your ferret is having some horrible symptoms right now, ask for an emergency appointment. Most vets, in my experience, will work you in. It might be a little less convenient where you have to, there have been days where, I've had an emergency, I've had to drop somebody off before work and pick them up after work. Instead of, versus taking them and waiting, there in the waiting room or in the parking lot for an hour while they diagnose them. But the important thing is to get the medical care for your ferret from a qualified professional.
Exactly.
There's only so much you can do.
I am not what I would consider a qualified professional. I do according to what the professional tells me to do.
Yeah.
So just so people understand, no, I'm not a vet. And I only do things according to what, and I keep pointing over here, but my phone, to what the vet tells me to do.
Yeah.
And that helps people. But it also, like you said, helps her. Some of that's already done. Okay. Now we have to look at other areas and see. And sometimes it doesn't. If you have all that information, it won't take you as long to get in and out of the vet's office. Not just her, but you.
Okay, we're going to pause there for this episode. Stay tuned for part 2 of our conversation with Denise Cummings. in episode 7 of Talkin' Tales. I do want to add 2 notes. First, early in the conversation, I mentioned that at the time my ferret Peter was facing a health challenge, that he was my only male ferret. While he was my only male ferret for a period of time, at that particular time, I had another very special male ferret named Milo. I mentioned that same Milo separately, and noted that he was about to turn 9 years old at the time of this recording. He did in fact make it to his 9th birthday on August 1st, 2022. But his health declined rapidly 2 days later, and 3 days after his birthday, I had to say goodbye to him. He was my first ferret ever to make it to that milestone, and he was my little superhero. Rest in peace, Milo. If you'd like to share a story about a special pet, visit us at talkintalespodcast.com or reach out to us on Twitter at talkintales. That's TALKINTAILS, or on Facebook at facebook.com/talkintales. If you'd like to support the show, you can find us on Patreon at patreon.com/talkintales. No matter what podcast app you choose, please take a moment to rate and review us. It helps us find new listeners, which means we can bring you even more stories.